Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get singles for all your Force of Will and other trading card games, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer member Vite Ramen. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey there, rulers! Welcome back after a long week of Force of Will to the Office Hours, your favorite ever live Force of Will vodcast featuring myself, DMO73, and I am joined tonight, as always, by Mike Grants.
Ahoy!
Oh, there he goes. And rocking the Froppy poster, just like always. He back. Ryan Miles.
What's going on, everybody? I play Force of Will again. It's great.
Yay! You do play Force of Will again, buddy. I saw you in Minnesota, and it was great.
I think this is the first event in like 2 years where I actually owned my deck, so that's
yes,
great.
yes. This man
crazy.
legitimately, Ryan. Welcome to the podcast. Ryan owns his own cards, Miles.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like literally for Worlds, that entire deck was yours.
Exactly.
Just like borrowing events, and it's like, you know what? This game is pretty good. You've survived COVID. You know, I'm getting back into it. Let's go. This is like a great set to start buying up again. Yeah, because I mean, it's just everything is more and more powerful.
Yeah.
I love the game, so we're back. We're fully in it again.
That's the thing. Like, I can't play competitively, but like my cards are doing well because I just give them to good players and they play my cards for me.
Jeremy's cards are like the winningest cards in any Force of Will collection.
Yeah, probably. My cards have won more events.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. So I do want to say as we get started here, if you like what we're doing and you want to consider supporting that channel, you can click the join button down below. On mobile, it's a little bit weird, but you do need to kind of go into like the main page here on YouTube, like the actual computer site. You can click that join button and become a member here. You can go ahead and help us get towards that next emote, get all kinds of perks like being able to access the emotes in the chat, as cool stuff like having us do deck doctoring for you, playing matches against us, all kinds of cool fun stuff. And it helps us do awesome stuff for the channel, like go to Minni and bring a whole stream crew with us and improve gear and all that kind of stuff. So we appreciate that. And as always, just go ahead and give us a like and a subscribe. You know, the usual feed the algorithm kind of stuff as we get started. Oh, also, and be sure to check out Odyssey Games. They do have boxes of the 7th still available, and they should have pre-orders up for the first set of Dual Cluster Game of the Gods up very, very soon. So check that out if you haven't already. Okay, speaking of Minnesota, we just had a GP. We got one GP left. It's an online one. And we just got the details announced that it's not 1 invite, but 3 invites, a paid plus 2 unpaid, which is more than we thought it was going to be before. So something a little bit more to take serious than we initially thought as this last GP of the season. First thoughts from you guys about the expansion of the pricing.
Incredible.
Awesome. Fantastic.
I cannot believe that an online event's getting paid support. Like, it's already gas just entering the online tournaments. I entered last time literally just because I wanted the promos, because that Ray of artwork is spice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to enter again because it's going to be spice once again. Easy peasy.
Yep. I am
and I can
using
just do
this
it from the comfort of my own home because I don't have the vacation days to take more days. So...
Yep. My plan here is I'm actually using this paid invite to bully an old Force of Will player out of retirement. As we were talking about, I now own cards, and I have a brother that maybe you guys know. He used to play Force of Will once upon a time. I'm like, you don't gotta travel. I'll give you the deck. It's a paid invite. Like, Bremont won an event, and then his girlfriend won an event, and then his brother got second. Like, he thinks that the Bremont dynasty is a new comic. Now, we gotta show him the Miles greatness. I can't win the event. I've already got it paid. You gotta get back in here. So that's the paid invite. It might be the ticket to actually get him to play.
Good old Boulevard. Coming back, taking a break from Runeterra to come play some FOW.
The freaking Boulevard. Man, I
message him on Facebook, bully him for me. Just say like, yo, you're playing this event. What are you gonna play? Just message him.
Man, I wish I had family members that played this game. Too bad I'm not.
I'm like a year off from having a family member that plays this game. I just need her reading level to come up just a bit more. Then
His
we'll
car
get
is
there.
named Alice. Play it anyway.
Piece of cake. So yeah, I do want to say that is super huge. Like I know that even in previous conversations we've had with Svetlana on this cast, it was that the online events were just going to be one invite. There was that one that had a paid, but the rest were going to be one unpaid, and just for what first person. Well, no, I think that this means that this is an improvement, right? This is the company suddenly throwing more at the events because they've seen that people have really been enjoying them and engaged. And it's being rewarded, which I think is huge. So just from that perspective of like we're back to pass downs. We've been pass downing all season, but now we're at the end of a season, end of 2 technical seasons of people with invites. So like,
Yep.
Pass downs galore, lots of opportunity for people to score those invites for if Worlds happens this year or carries over into next year. But like, it's awesome. It's just super great. You can sign up, by the way. It's October 23rd and 24th, or that weekend. We'll be streaming it here if you're not going to play in it. And then you can check out the link in the description below to get signed up for it. Yeah, it's super fun. It's super great. It's going to be a great time. But there is some things that we got to talk about because I think that there's some big takeaways from Minnesota that really need to play into what people are preparing for this one. Namely, and I'm going outside of I'll start it here. Going outside of the top 8, within the top 8, we had 6 unique decks. I'll say that from the perspective of like it might have been the same ruler combination, but like the core of what they were trying to do played a little different, or the end game was a little different. So I consider that 2 different. Ryan's is one of the examples of being a very different Carlina Dante than the Carlina Dante that we saw from the other player. But then even outside of it, as we go to top 16, we had like 3 other decks still, like even more different decks in that top 16 bracket. And now we've seen that play out. So I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts about coming from this event to a new event, knowing that the card pool is not changing, and we've had like 9 decks all within this like bubble range. What are your thoughts about, what's the takeaway from that as you prep for Minnesota or as the online GP?
For me, there is a lot of like fringe stuff that you kind of have to like just keep your wits about you. I think Wolfgang is a threat. I think Thief Mooge is a threat. And these aren't decks that you can forget about because they do pop up and they can absolutely goon you. But for me, I like the real boogeymen, and we did see like the diversity. I think it's like Belial is very, very difficult to beat. I think Prideful Rule is a great card. Dante is very, very difficult to beat because Virgilius is probably the best card in Forceful right now. Just
Pretty
by
close.
himself.
Pretty close.
It's actually insane. So that's why you saw, Dante Belial, and then I think Carlina is the third piece. Carlina's really good, but what sets her over the top, honestly, is 6 Sage Stone. And when you just have a random turn where you're boosting 4 extra will, especially if you are playing stuff like Virgilius, and now that 4 extra will just turns into, 400 damage. It's crazy how much damage that ruler can do. With that card. So like those are the 3 boogeymen, and I'm still not sure what the best like combination is. I think the Dante Belial list was really cool. I think the Carlina Belial list that won with the Blazing Cthulhu, 1200 damage tokens just coming at you on turn 1. That's really cool. So those like the 3 powerhouses that I'm really worried about. And the worst part is I don't know what the best combination is. So anything from those can come out. You've also got a Stem of Belial kind of sitting on the outskirts as well. And then while worrying about those big 3 and what combination you're going to see, you do have those extra rogue decks that if you're not prepared for them, they will absolutely take games away from you because they are building themselves to counter what you are doing. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's terrifying. I almost am more afraid of this meta that we're going into than the Wild West that we just had.
Yeah.
Because for this one, it's like, okay, do something broken, and then people won't know exactly what to play around, so they'll be afraid. And it was like, okay, well, I just win games with Virgilius because people weren't really aware of that now. But now going to this next event, it's like, a Thief Mooge deck that wants to beat Belial can beat Belial, but can they beat Dante Carlina or something like that? So it gets really those rogue decks that existed here now have a better bullseye to paint on the main deck. So I'm really worried about what they're going to look like and if they're going to be even stronger than we saw here.
Yeah, for sure. I also think that the community has community as a whole has kind of seen some pivoting in terms of our impressions of certain cards, because now we've seen those cards that we like maybe weren't playing or maybe considering playing, but now we've seen them like play out in a competitive environment. These are cards like Castle of Beatrice, Castle of Carlina. I mean, we already kind of knew that Prideful Rule was insane, but like now we've seen Prideful Rule in action, and it's like, holy crap, that card is actually just puts in so much work. But we've also seen like cards. We've also had the opposite, right? Where we've seen some things where at first glance you're like, yes, this is absolutely insane, this is what people are going to be doing, but we've seen it play out where it's like, maybe it's not as simple as all that. I would speak to Erythropia. Erythropia is a very good card for Belial decks, for the decks that are trying to do this, but I will say that like we saw games on stream and at Minnesota where Erythropia did not play out as people wanted it to, or like people played around it. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways, like you said, Ryan. There's a really big target now painted. Like we've seen what it looks like, so we can understand it a bit more. And we've also seen how things can stumble. So like we can now take that and put it into our testing. We walked into Minnesota saying it was going to be a format of comfort and skill. And that's exactly what it was. But now we have an online event where it's the same kind of environment, but with more knowledge.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I also expect to see more Wolfgang 2 players, I think. That was one of my biggest surprises, is we only had 6.
There's one big problem with Wolfgang, and it's Virgilius. The deck does not, like, yes, you get to cancel the God Arts, but every deck is running Virgilius, and the removal is not efficient enough to, like, deal with Virgilius and also prevent enough damage most of the time.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, I played against it in Swiss, and it was just over in 4 turns. Just Virgilius on 1, Virgilius on 2, burn. Like, they just have
for sure.
a hard time finding. They have to, like, have 4 crystallization or something, and even then, it's like, is that good enough? You know, it's just, the deck should be posed well, but the one boogeyman that they can't really deal with efficiently is just really holding them back, I think.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that if you're going to play Wolfgang 2, take into your testing is like, how do we beat Virgil, right? Because now we almost kind of have the questions, right? Like we went into a Wild West, like you said, it was do the most broken things that you can, try to catch people off guard. Now we're coming out of it, but okay, now we know what questions we have to be able to answer going into this next event. So it's a very different testing environment. Mike, for you didn't participate in Minni. I think you were busy that weekend. And also, I don't think we saw you very much in the chat. But from your perspective, going into this next kind of event, having seen the top 8 lists and kind of seen what was being played, what are your kind of thoughts going into the online GP?
I'm actually really excited to see what people bring, just because I think, like, obviously we're going to see a lot of good stuff, like, kind of come to the top, just because, you know, more players are, you know, I think a lot of players were flocking to the new cards that they perceive to be the best cards. And I think that's the reason we saw such a heavy Fallen Angel breakdown in the top spots, because the new set's just out. People are experimenting with the new sets. People are experimenting with the new rulers. We're going to see more of that.
Yeah.
Which is why I think going into this next GP, I expect to see more Feeth Muges go into top cuts than the one we saw in the top 8 this time around.
Okay.
And I anticipate that people are going to just kind of go buck wild at this point and try and figure out whatever's the most consistent combination of things. The problem is, the most consistent thing about the Fallen Angel rulers is the fact that you have the God's Arts, you have this like safety net with Belial, you have this massive swing with Asthma getting Inferno to even the playing field, or just, you know, remove a board. You have Dante to just kind of like always have access to Virgil whenever you need him. So like those 3 have very consistent pieces put together that kind of form these decks. But I think just the overall consistency that Feeth Muge brings is going to mean that any players that are willing to put in the time and experiment with that deck are going to have favorable matchups. And I expect to see good players that are done kind of experimenting with new sets, rulers, and say, all right, cool, we experimented with new rulers, that's great. What broken stuff can we put into this incredibly consistent engine?
And so this is one of the things, that's a good talking point, because there was a deck, a Feeth Muge deck at Minni that we never ended up seeing on stream. I wanted to find it at least once. It never ended up working out. The one Feith Mooge we ended up grabbing wasn't playing it. So we just kind of missed out. And it's this idea, we talked about it, we posted it. Victoria did a wonderful little infographic for us about the infinite life loss loop for Feith Mooge. And it was designed to paint a target on the back of Belial decks, to say, look, okay, you're going to have these God's Arts, I'm going to ignore them. I'm just trying to do my consistent piece. I'm going to skillfully find a way to just loop you down to 0 life, and that's going to be the end of it. I had a lot of conversations about this where they sacrificed simplicity and some of their like other matchups, not necessarily like a huge sacrifice, but not like the yes, I'm gonna do A to B, there's nothing you can do to stop me, game over. They sacrificed some of that to be able to shore up the Belial matchup. And I think what we saw, and Logan's in the chat, Paul, Tom, and Logan, we didn't have to see it. Shadow X was back for Infinite Life. I mean, you could also do it with the one drop Cthulhu. It was the same kind of thing. That's just how it worked. From what I heard, the mistakes the losses of them came down to play mistakes, because again, they sacrificed simplicity. It's a very complicated sequence to pull off, and it has a lot more moving pieces that you can then try to interrupt them with. Or Castle of Carlina was a problem. From what I heard, just like being able to successfully resolve removal and kind of do stuff like that. And the beauty is we have Logan in the chat, so he can correct me if I'm wrong. But that comes down to the piece that you were talking about, Mike. It's going to be about practice. Like, it is going to be absolutely about practice if you're going to want to be on that idea, because you can find a way to beat it. You can answer that question. The problem then becomes how consistently can you answer that question, which I think is, for any deck, for any matchup, that is the biggest piece of this next meta. Like, if you found the answer, that's great. How consistently can you do it? Because this format is gonna challenge consistency more than anything else. Because there are certainly gonna be players who are gonna go, I'm just gonna play Comfort and play like Carlina, Virgil, just like simplicity, and you're gonna say, okay, how often can I answer your Comfort?
Yeah. One other thing I think that's kind of holding back Feith Mooge, one of the problems that they saw was the old Feith Mooge gang, the Minneapolis guys, didn't really have the full grasp on how broken Virgilius was yet. So coming in, like, yeah, you need the one extra combo piece you need for the anti-Belial combo. You know, like before we would do Prisia, Magnus Beast, Never End. It's just you play that and you win the game next turn. But now with the extra setup of Selective Decapitation or the Rezard, you need like one extra Prisia or one extra like card that you have to play. And with Virgil really cranking the tempo of the format up to 11, and not just Virgil either, the Carlino Belial deck that we saw win the event was playing, the Blazing Cthulhu, which is just 1,200 damage coming at you, and it's 4 different guys that you have to deal with. Like, the lethal threats coming out of these, like, Belial decks is kind of terrifying. So you have to not only find the time to set up your combo, but also find the time to not just lose in the meantime. And that's what's kind of been pinpointing Feith Mooge and making it a little bit harder for her to play, is that you don't have time to big show like you used to. You really need to have a great hand of like interaction plus big show plus Melfi plus Lycion to be able to get ahead in tempo. And it's really hard to actually, like, you could not ever play a big show deck outside of Feith Mooge right now, because you really need all 3 mulligans to actually get that consistently and make your hand 100% perfect. And even then, like, because Garyon can interrupt your combo piece now with the big show, like, you need 2 Prisias to protect that.
Yep,
otherwise
for sure.
Garyon can completely forget, like, just own you. So it's making the combo more complicated to beat Belial, but also getting aggro down by Belial, because the Dante version is Virgil, the Carlina version has Blazing Cthulhu. It makes it really hard for them. And I do think there is a way they can come around. It's just they got to find a way soon,
I imagine we see Exorcist Mage starting to find its way back into the meta again, because I think what we saw,
those tokens, absolutely.
I think what we saw, talking about the Carlina decks, is I think we didn't see enough players truly capitalizing on Carlina's once per turn as a punish. I think that Carlina got to resolve her one spell per turn way too often in terms of like, this is going to resolve and then you're going to have to answer it later, as opposed to, you're trying to do that. Stop. Like the biggest ones that I saw even in my games were like, you're using your one spell per turn to play Virgil. Okay, now that you've done that, I'm going to let that resolve. I'm not going to fight you over it. But before you go to combat, I'm a prideful rule the shit out of that thing. Like, things like that, where we're like, you weren't trying to steal, players weren't trying to steal tempo from Carlina, recognizing that, like, Carlina does give herself natural vulnerability every single time she casts a spell for turn, that she just has things that she can't interact with, which is why I think Castle of Carlina performed so well for a lot of people, because I think in matchups where people started to kind of like realize what they needed to do, it was too late, because suddenly Castle of Carlina was on field, they didn't have to fight cancel wars, their Garians were always going to resolve, like their bigger things had barrier, you couldn't banish them with Inferno, like you were kind of like a little too late. And so that's one of the big lessons I think too, is recognizing.
Man, when I tell you how much I love playtesting Carlina, hitting the 6 Sage Stone turn 1, just doming somebody with Garyon, I can't even start to tell you how good this feels. Especially we were playing a Wanderer matchup. I think our buddy Scott was playing your Foxless, Jeremy.
Yes.
Messing around with that, and I dropped Gary on turn 1, dome him for 15. He's like, my hand is 1.
Yeah. Well, it's also one of the reasons why I will give credit to Tyler Tompkins, who played with me in the Wanderer event. He and I, because of how seeding works in Force of Will, he technically took first, but we had the same record. Breakers, woo! He was back on a train that I think a lot of people kind of popped off of, which was playing the Welsers in that. Because what he was trying to do is he was trying to do exactly what I'm talking about. He was trying to punish Carlinas, to say like, look, he was also playing 4 of Brad main, like he was trying to punish the Carlinas. Like he was aiming for that slot of saying like, look, I'm not going to resolve Last Lecture because you're just going to Gary in it. I'm not trying to cancel your shit, because we're going to take advantage of the fact that we can't get into cancel wars because you're casting 1 card per turn. I'm going to just put stuff back in your hand and let it go that way. And to his credit, he said that Tyler, in his history of Force of Will, is not traditionally a control player. Any of the times that his top 8 at Atlanta GP, he was running a very aggressive deck. He's a very red, turn things sideways kind of guy. So he admits that lack of practice was something that hurt him down. But I didn't hear him at all in the weekend talk about how Carlina was a difficult matchup for him. He just had to play smart. And when he and I played my Wanderer Carlina deck versus his, he was exactly right. Like, having the 6 Sages was just like, I cannot interact with this, and I have no way to protect this, because this gets around Castle of Carlina, this gets around my Goddard, this gets around, and I've cast a spell already, so there's literally nothing I can do. So it's one of those things, like I've said, I don't think any threat that we saw I think this hot take, right? I don't think any threat that we saw in Minnesota GP is unanswerable. I think any of these decks can be tested against, and you can find something that's good against it, and you can find a way to beat around the matchup, and you can figure it out. Do I think that there's a deck that can beat everything? Absolutely the hell not. But I do think that it's not like, these are just the top 8 lists, this is what people are going to play. I think you can target those things.
Mikage, that'll beat everything.
That's true. Unless it's tier 0 Mikage, then we just all lose, right?
100%.
And I just think that's the important thing, because we don't have a ton of time before this event. It's just like, don't feel like you have to play these top 8 lists, but more so you just got a really good explanation. You just got a really good example of what your gauntlet needs to be. And
don't test against my deck. I played that deck a little bit for the memes. Don't play Griffin. Just don't do it.
Yeah, I don't know why you were playing Griffin. That was weird.
Listen. The idea is, and in testing this happened, is against Belial decks, you have to play the long game. So you set up your graveyard. Every card in your deck not named Virgilius is only there to go to your graveyard when you've got Art Satan, okay? And then you got Art Satan, Castle of Beatrice gets removed. But before you flipped into Satan, you got out of Carlina, and then you go play Mikage Rhea, got art Satan. So Satan resolves, right? You wipe your entire hand field, boom, remove your castle. Rhea resolves. You load your graveyard because you had 4 Griffins in your
And
hand.
then you send another Castle of Beatrice to the grave.
No, then you send part of True Power.
Oh, part of True
and you
Power.
sack the Rhea for the for the part of True Power, get back a Griffin, draw 2 cards because of Carlina Goddard, and get 2 stones, and then you play the Rhea, and you do it again, and you draw like 4 cards, you get 4 stones, then you play Rhea, put a Castle of Beatrice in your graveyard, and say, all right, Belial deck, I've got a token that you can kill maybe off the top of your deck. Otherwise, I've got 8 stones, 2 Griffins, and 5 cards in hand. Let's play a game. But I never did it at this event, so it was completely terrible. But when it happens, it's great. Just don't test against it. It's not the best version of the deck by a mile.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest. I think that is the biggest takeaway. Is I think for the most part, I think that there are a couple of the lists that felt pretty rock solid in terms of they're probably not going to shift much. I will say probably the Dante Belial, the Dante Belial Bremont list, I think is pretty solid. I don't think that deck really has much room to change. I also think that the Estema Belial lists probably don't change terribly too much. But like the other stuff, like so much opportunity for different like variation or tweak out or things like that. Logan was saying how Nameless Knight against Virgil to be able to say like, hey, you know, if you're playing that longer game, get Nameless Knight. So then suddenly 1 virtual ping costs you 3, and that kind of slows him down if you can keep up the early pressure. Like these are things that we can you can try to see if that works, and then how consistently does it work. We're not going to write off, you know, one side or the other.
What does Nameless Knight do? Does it make you pay more?
It makes you pay 3 for every or pay 2 additional for every activate ability of a Resonator.
And it removes a Darkness Resonator from the game when it enters.
Yeah.
I was like, this doesn't sound like a Virgil answer because Virgil costs 1 and this costs 2, so I'm already lost. But okay, you get it. You remove the first Virgil, and suddenly the second Virgil is nowhere near as potent. I'm following now.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's a question for you guys. With Virgil being the best card in Force Will right now, from what we're seeing,
I think Prideful Rule's the best card in Force Will right now. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that.
All right, does answer Virgil, which is a problem.
All right, then the question: do we see people maining 4 of the answer to both of those cards?
Which
is
is
the answer to those cards?
Persona Mask, baby.
I don't know what you just did to me.
Persona Mask is the problem is Persona Mask is a 1-drop.
What is it?
It's 1 green, cancel a card of cost 3 cost or more.
Oh, yeah.
The problem is that's a 1-cost card. Yeah, the problem is that's a 1-cost card. Yeah.
That's the problem, right? Virgil comes down and hoses you for 10 damage with more damage threatening you, and you're like, oh, you flipped Dante, so you played Virgil for 1, but not really. Let me answer that with a 1-drop. Oh, you untapped your Carlina and Gary on my 1-drop, and
I think we're probably gonna see more Hunting Angels mained, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like going into this next meta, it was a sideboard card for a lot of people, or it was a card to be like, I'm gonna use this so I can keep myself safe from Violet. I think that with what we've seen from Virgil is that you need to be able to have will-efficient answers to be able to prevent that early game damage from Virgil. Because don't get me wrong, Virgil in the late game is probably not swinging. Virgil in the late game is a Vlad. That's his whole job. Virgil in the late game is to stick and then burn you. But in the early game, that 1,000 damage is super relevant, and the ability for him later to be able to like hit dome boards and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Hunting Angels start getting mainboarded. So then you have things to be able to be like, no, not going to stop that. Like Wolfgang probably pretty comfortably plays Hunting Angels mained, right? We're talking about, right? Because he can hit White Will pretty dang fast. So that's not something that's terribly difficult for him to be able to do, which can then shore up the game. And then in the later game, later on, Wolfgang, if he can establish well enough, can easily set up like board nags so that Virgil never gets to enter or doesn't ever get to swing. It's surviving that early game. So, like, there are paths, right? But now you have 3 weeks to figure out what are the problems, what are the paths, and how quickly and how efficiently can I do it, like consistently. Which I think is the best place to, like, from an outsider's perspective, just like seeing the evolution of the meta, it's a really cool space. Because we're going from one GP to the next, and I thoroughly expect to see a ton of change. And I can only imagine that those testing sessions are going to still be really, really interesting and fun, rather than just, okay, let me just grind this deck for another 40 hours, right?
The good news is, if you're trying to test against Virgil and you find out the answer is, oh, I'm not answering Virgil, your game's only going to take 5 minutes.
Yeah, you could just move on. You could just move on to the next deck. It's fine. Done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was actually my favorite part of this event. Was I was like basically playing an aggro deck, so I would just like play. I'd be like, "Oh, you're not playing Belial? Well, this isn't going to take very long." And then I'd be up in 10 minutes. Like, wow.
Yeah.
This is great. So.
Yeah, we actually did. I mean, like we went to time a couple times, but it was only like, maybe 3 or 4 games that were in time. It was not bad.
Yeah.
It was not bad.
Chiron on Violet, and my games were faster than his. Like that says a lot about Virgil, I think.
Yeah, very much so. I think people were really. I think the biggest thing for Virgil is people were writing off just how strong a turn 1 Dante flip is. Like I think we saw that as like, oh, well, you're not really doing Dante anything except for Virgil. And that, I mean, I guess you have a Virgil. And it's like, no, I have a Virgil. Like, that's good.
Yeah.
Like, and we saw that in application. And just, yeah, it's a lot. Like, I saw people burning God's Arts on 1 because their opponent played a Virgil and they just didn't have the answer for it. And you're like, that feels really good as the person playing against Belial to have you waste a God Art on my turn 1 before you've called a stone.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with like the Dante Carlina deck is when you just like play a Virgil and you also still have 2 mana available because you're Carlina, and it's like I have to God Art before that Virgil resolves, and then I still have to kill it, or else I'm just losing half of my life on turn 1. And you're a Virgil deck, so I can't allow that to happen. It's just crazy how much pressure that card puts down. Yeah. But again,
for sure.
Rule,
answerable, like absolutely. So like answers exist in the meta for it. It's
dies
just
to removal.
Dies. There are several removal options that are all good for him, right?
Yeah.
It's just I think the biggest thing about this is like we said, we've found the problems to now have to be able to answer. Like we found the questions to be able to answer. And so having that knowledge, playtesting can tweak, deck building can tweak, and we're better suited for it. I think that people underestimated just even the pressure of Belial's token generation. I think, or like the way that Belial uses tokens. I think people are like, oh, well, it also generates a token. That's cool. And it's the same kind of thing of like, oh, wait, it also generates a token. Like that's a problem that I now have to deal with.
Could you imagine in the year 2018 if Force of Will made like you could like picture them printing like a resonator with Bane, right? It would if a resonator had flying and Bane, it would like cost 2 and you would play it at sorcery speed. And now we're just playing it for 1, also killing a dude, also like playing it for 1 mana, but it's not really 1 mana, it's 3 mana, so you can't Gary
in it.
Total is an insane card.
Yeah, Pride for Rule's gross.
One more thing I do want to talk about though is that these Fallen Angel decks, while they all do have different identities, like as long as they are playing, Virgil, or if the games are just going long enough, there is the threat of Satan. I know my deck especially was really abusing Satan, but that is another issue that these other decks have to tackle. Something that stuff like Fiefsing and Wolfgang are not very strong against. They don't top deck very well after Satan has resolved. So even if you are able to like weather this, like it's crazy that you have to play so many cards to not die to Virgil, and then all of those cards that you play to like survive the early game, you just don't want to see off the top once they get to the point where they're flipping Satan on you. Like Satan is a real problem. And I really thought with all the stuff that we saw, like they printed Satan, it's like, wow, that's really good, right? Like that's kind of crazy. Like how do you beat that? You just have to top deck. They printed Astemus Castle, they printed Mega Era, they printed stuff that you could like play from your removed area to like counter Satan, and like those don't really work as well as you'd want them to, because you can like play a card and then go Satan, and now all of those banish effects like take out the thing they played alongside the Satan, and there's still a 40/40, and you have no hand. Like it's crazy how much Satan actually matters, and it's like the extra back-breaking part of Virgil. It's like I'm killing you on turn 2, and if not, you're playing the game with no hand. Like that's something you really have to mess around with when you're testing.
To Toby's comment, Jeremy said that Dante isn't a main ruler. I said that Dante is not a main ruler. Virgil is the main ruler if you're playing a Dante primary deck. That's to go back. I was just like, no, it's not about Dante. It's about Virgil. Like Virgil's your primary there.
The fact that Dante searches Virgil, but also like Dante is like single-handedly keeping Beatrice from being able to play the game. Like, you just can't play Beatrice into Dante decks. And a lot of these decks aren't playing Dante because they're like, oh, I need to shut off these graveyards. It's really just like, I need to play my 10-10 on turn 1. And then I guess also you're not allowed to play Castle of Beatrice, so
Yeah,
that's fine.
yeah. I think that's one of the other points too, is like the games that I played, in shifting a little bit to the Wanderer, of like when I had Castle of Beatrice engraved and it went uncontested.
It's insane.
It's gross. It's absolutely gross. To go to the Wanderer event, we were playing Carlina Butterflies. Mike tries to call it something different. I refuse to call it whatever Mike wants to call it. It's called Carlina Butterflies. We're playing Trow, the Giant. We're playing Moonbeam Butterfly. We're playing all these kind of one-ups.
Hungry Box.
Hungry Box. He wants to call it Hungry Box.
Because you're gluttony and you're playing a toolbox. Of
I'm
gonna +1 Mike on this one. Actually.
Yeah, it's just I'm not a Smash player, so I was like, Smash reference.
Jigglypuff players can go to the same place Dante is, but Hungry Box is a good deck name.
Yeah, so we were doing that, and like the kind of crazy things that the deck was doing was it was doing stuff in Wanderer that were the things that we were trying to do in Wanderer, we're trying to take advantage of what tech cards we imagined we would see. Like we were playing an on-one Castle of Carlina, an on-one Magic Zone Research Institute with Carlina being like, do you want to burn your Energize to Lorite this? That's fine. I still get to call Stone. Like we were trying to take advantage and like force people into awkward plays because we knew people were going to be playing Lorite. We knew people were going to be doing all these things, and so we wanted to really be taking advantage of it from the shift of what New Frontiers was going to be. So we were playing Trow to be able to like search out utility 1-drops and like get stuff back. And one of the pretty common plays that we were doing is I would do Trow to grab a Rhea, cast the Rhea, send Castle of Beatrice to the grave, and then immediately try to bring the Trow back to my hand if we hit 6 Sage's Stone off of the Trow, which was disgusting. But the longer the game went, having this kind of recycle engine, which is kind of what Ryan was talking about in terms of the things that you can do with Stan, from like being able to reutilize that graveyard, or by sending your own Castle of Beatrice to be able to keep your graveyard safe or stuff like that. Like repeatable value, it's crazy how much the late game of FOW, like we see late game more, but decks that were prepared for the late game like floored decks that weren't. Like, and I think that's one of the big things is like we saw pretty big differences in like deck construction in terms of utility tech for like, I need to be able to play to the end. I need to be able to play beyond the end. And like you said, Ryan, like some decks were just like, I'm in top deck mode. That's a good game. Like I just don't have a way to get around that, right? And so, Castle of Beatrice to be able to bring back your Virgils from the grave, things like I was surprised at how much, like in my Wanderer games, how much Megara was annoying. I was like, oh wait,
oh yeah,
like this card is just kind of here, and I have to deal with it, and it's like that card is playing towards the late game of saying like I don't really need to generate advantage now. I'm gonna invest for the later game tech.
I'm gonna play this card by Stealth Zone.
Yeah. Also that, like, I'm gonna pay to put a card face down so that I'm at null. And I'm
you
like,
want to hear some fun tech that I learned this week actually about stealth specifically? Because after the Wanderer event, I was watching Charlie do his stream with the Wanderer stuff, and he was talking about stealth, and I'm like, oh yeah, that exists. I forgot about that. And I'm like, wait a minute, can you like set stealth stuff in New Frontiers still? And you absolutely can. So for like the Beatrice decks that like they top deck like a Hunting Angel, it's like, oh, I play Hunting Angel to not die to Virgil, but now it's in my hand and I can't get rid of it. Pay 2 mana, put it in standby, baby. That's out of your hand. Draw some Electro triggers. Let's go.
Yeah.
I was thinking that I could like set stuff like. So the really intricate thing with Castle of Beatrice is that it's like vulnerable in your graveyard because your opponent can void it. So in like the Turbo Satan deck, you want it in your hand so that when you like do your Satan God Art, it goes to the graveyard and then gets removed. They can't really interact with it. But even in your hand, they can Dark Alice's Smile. And I'm like, wait a minute, Giga Brain, ready? What if I set it as a chant standby? So it's an entity on the field, and then I God Art Satan, and then it goes to the graveyard. They literally can't touch it. But I learned that
this is why you asked that in the group chat?
Yeah, chant standbys aren't entities. Yep, chant standbys just sit there.
So fun fact, there might be a rules rewrite because the standby zone is not part of the field, but the destroy cards section of the rules only tells you how to destroy cards in the field and how to destroy rulers. It does not tell you how to destroy cards in the standby zone.
Yeah.
So we might have just been playing for years of Forcewell where Artemis Bow didn't actually work. But that's my fun sidebar into Wanderer. That's what I have to contribute.
Yeah, that's the only other problem.
Deck lists.
That's the only other problem with about the fact that like stealth, unfortunately, when triggered, still counts as casting a spell. Otherwise, otherwise Carlita's stealth.
Yeah, no.
Otherwise, Carlita's stealth would just be gross. You're just like,
I thought about that too. Very quickly dashed by the CR.
yeah. Unfortunately, don't get around Carlita. It's not an activate ability or an automatic. Unfortunate. But yeah, we were
legitimately broken.
Yeah.
By the way. It's like not
so,
even close.
yeah, not even close. It'd be the only way that stealth comes back is like playing that.
Just like think about this, right? You go Magic Stone Research Lab, get a stone, you trow, and then like on your next turn, you're setting double Riza and you're already on, or set double Melder, yeah, double Riza, and you're already on 4 stones, and you're just like,
the game's over, hooray!
Wait, you start with 2,000 life. You have Melder online on turn 1.
We do. Yeah, we do have that on one.
Wander is crazy to me, man.
Wander is crazy, but I think that's the thing about like there's still lessons that can be learned. There's still lessons that can be learned from Wanderer that apply to New Frontiers, because one of the things that I found even when I was playing throughout the course of the Wanderer event was I was saying like this card that I thought would perform one way when I actually got it into practical application suddenly performed in a much different way or in an additional way that I wasn't initially thinking about, and that was insanely good. Like I would speak to again, we teched in a one of the green Pharesia from Rebirth of Legends into the
good
deck.
one, the green one.
Yeah, the green one,
which is crazy to me. Yeah,
but like that card was an absolute unit. Every time I got that card to resolve, it was just like, well, I'll have this kind of like incidental, like it can sometimes turn my cards into, better cards. It can sometimes give myself protection if I need it. It's a body, it's quick cast, I can do it during my opponent's turn. And then you're like, wait a minute. If I'm playing against a Carlina deck, they can only cast 1 spell per turn. 1 instant speed free barrier seems really, really good. Oh, wait, people are playing Virgils, turning a dead Garion into my hand into 1,000 damage to hit a Virgil that can't like hit me back because it's not attacking yet. Oh, that seems really good. Like, it's one of these things where you really have to like. Really in an environment where we encourage you to throw stuff at the wall because it'll probably stick better than I think you think it will. That like also, yeah, Moonshade is pay life, not deal damage. So like Logan, unfortunately, Logan killed himself on Tree 2, unfortunately.
Yeah.
He was
milling cards, and I'm like, can I read your stone real quick? I think it says pay life, but I could be wrong. And he like looks at me, he's like, no, it's like I know I built this deck. I know that it says deal damage, and I'm like,
it's pay life.
Wait, really? Oh, okay. I can see. Good job too, but correctly this time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
and there's just like, there's things to be learned, and I think that this is also a format where discover, like even in New Frontiers, even just in general, where you can. I think there's still a lot of really unique interactions left to discover, of like the idea of the new Pharesia with Castle of Beatrice, right? That's an interaction that I really didn't think of at all when I was building the deck. I was just like, I want to be able to recycle Trows. And I was like, oh wait, I just have this like repeatable, like I can just turn dead Garions in my hand into machine gun ammo, right? And just bring it back and do all these other things. And I didn't think about that when I was building the deck, but when I started playing it, I was like, oh wait, this is busted. A Castle of Carlina against the blue Electo decks with, it's just like, I'll just have to discard my hand? You can't get rid of my things on field? Great! Like, that's fine. I don't mind losing my hand, right? I'll just beat you over the face with the stuff I have here that can fly over your Electos and stuff like that.
I have a really interesting observation, because as you were talking about the Castle of Beatrice and the Green Pharesia, I was like, I haven't played Wanderers. I was thinking about New Frontiers, right? And I'm like, I don't like It feels like the format is actually not slow enough to ever get to the point where like Castle of Beatrice loops into like Theresia stuff. Because I was trying to do like Castle of Beatrice into Altising, where you have like a 5 mana infinite
Sure.
cancel spell with Glimpse of Prodigy, and I was like, why would that make sense in a Wanderer event that it would be slower than New Frontiers? But the more I think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense because a lot of the most powerful cards that exist right now have come out within the past 6 months, right? Like the past three sets have been completely stacked in terms of Forcible's history, in terms of power level, and that applies to both the problems and the answers. But the answers in Forcible that exist in Wanderer, like the Lorite, like Fair's Spell, even, are actually historically more powerful in the past than they are now. So Wanderer actually has access to better answers, but only the same threats that New Frontiers really has. Like old
Correct.
threats in Wanderer don't match up to the cards we have now. So it does make sense actually that the format would be slower and be able to see that kind of thing take away. And I'm only like thinking about it now where the game is more powerful in Wanderer as a reactive game instead of doing the proactive things. Like Virgil probably doesn't get nearly as much leverage.
Oh, I
in
killed so
Wanderer.
many Virgils in
Yeah,
Wanderer.
like it doesn't actually do as much because you have even more answers for it. Whereas in New Frontiers, it's just the most powerful proactive thing you can do. So
Yeah.
that's actually a really interesting thing that I didn't think about. Is Wanderers probably slower than New Frontiers
Yeah.
because your answers
My
are better.
my
It's crazy.
record was like 401 at the end of the event. I drew and like I would say that my like Wanderer focused matchups, because I did play against people who literally just brought their New Frontier stack over
That's
to
a lot.
Wanderer because it's what they had, right? It's what they
Yeah,
had.
yeah.
My Wanderer focused New Frontiers decks went to like, oh, you and I both have 7 stones. I have 10 because I've been ramping stones, but like we're at that back and forth game, right? Because of a lot of what you said is the old answers are still very, very good against the current threats.
Lorite is still that guy.
Lorite is absolutely still that guy. I did stop a recovery of a Carlina after they floated Will before they recovered with their 6-stage stone.
Trigger?
Yeah,
Oh my
so I
God.
was just like, now that both of your rulers are tapped and that can't float any Will, after you floated Will with Carlina, Lorite, you don't recover. And then they're like, whoops. I'm like, yeah, that's the thing. Maybe don't always do that. Be patient.
I
So
would never think of that like in New Frontiers. If it's like, I'm playing my first Wanderer game, it's just like, yeah, because your ruler's gonna untap. You don't want to float the will, but you have to if you're worried about Lord. It's crazy, yeah.
yeah, so it's just like so it's almost a punish to float Will in that situation, because it's like, well, I can either have the floating Will now and then have this Void Stone, or I can not float the Will and have access to 3 5-color sources, right? The decisions in Wanderer are different, but pose very similar challenges to what we face now. You just have a smaller pool of answers to deal with, and in both formats, it's very fun. It's very rewarding too. I will say that it is very rewarding. I think Mike and I went through like Mike and I probably had like 4 or 5 conversations before the event of like, what if we did this? What if we wait, what? And then we tried it.
We spent a minimum of like 6 hours on the phone together.
Yeah, just like going over this deck list. And then like I literally audibled a couple of changes like the night before the Wanderer event.
Talking to me about it.
I was just like, Mike, this is what I'm like. Mike, this is what I'm doing. I'm playing it, and it worked out great. But like, I had this. I played competitive for 3 years. I qualified twice. That Wanderer event simultaneously reminded me why I loved competitive play and why I was so glad to get out of it. Because at the end, the last match, if that last match had taken place like 2 hours later in the day, I would not have slept the rest of the day. I would not have been able to sleep that night. Like, my hands were like this, like the whole time in my last match, and I was like, oh yeah, this is competitive nerves. This is the thing. Simultaneously, this is cool to experience after 2 years of not playing, and also, damn it.
This is why I'm trying to retire, but this game keeps sucking me back in, and I can't get away. Like when you play,
they took me out, they pulled me back in.
When you play a good game of Force of Will like that, it is just one of the most like that's just why I love Force of Will, because those late game situations just hit different than any other game that I've played. Like Magic late games usually grind down and you're playing off the top, but it's just like suspenseful but not very interesting. Yu-Gi-Oh late games get very complex, but board states really tend to devolve, and it's once again top decks. But Forcible can hold a lot of gas for many turns. And that's true in New Frontiers and in Wanderer. When that happens, and you're making those decisions, and you're really like playing off the top, like I mean, my most nerve-wracking event was Worlds, and on turn 7, or on like turn 6, I'm not thinking about like, wow, what am I gonna top deck? It's like, how do I set up a haiku? You know, like this has just been what is so amazing about Forcible is when the games when the format's really good like this, it is just such a crazy kind of thing to play. So,
like there were some times where I won a game by knowing that my out in the late game was Virgil, knowing that I had one left in the deck, but knowing that my opponent had a cancel. And I was like, how do I play through this? And then I went, wait a minute. Kaguya's Moonbeam Butterfly for 5. And they went, go to cancel. And I went, Carlina's God's Art. Uncancelable Kaguya's Moonbeam Butterfly.
Oh, did you
go get the
or something?
No, I got Virgil.
Okay.
So I was able to.
Okay.
Yeah, because I paid
uncancelable
Virgil from the deck. So to be able to like,
you were like purposefully overpaying the Moonbeam Butterfly to like use Carlina Goddard and then get like a 2-drop or something, but this is still just as good.
Yeah, like a play to the outs, right? And like, outs. But like you wouldn't think of
for my butterfly to get a 1-drop.
Yeah,
I mean, it lets you cancel. It lets you Carlina's Goddard. Like it's so big, right? I was like, whoa.
Yeah, just like hey, or you know, like I knew there was a point where I was like, you know what? I think in this matchup, even though it's gonna set me back on tempo, I've got a Belial to be able to keep myself safe for at least a turn. I'm gonna slam Carlina's Castle on 1, knowing that if he tries to cancel, I can Goddard and protect it. Because I feel like it's gonna do so much, and that's exactly what happened. I slammed the Carlina's Castle on 1, he went to cancel, wasted a cancel, I Goddarded to protect it, and proceeded to just go from there to win the game. Like,
Carlina's Castle is like another like very quiet, insane card in the format for New Frontiers as well. Like we talked about, you know, like the big ones like Castle of Beatrice, Virgil, Prideful Rule, Electo kind of, but Dante really shuts that down. But like Castle of Carlina is just like a very quiet 1 to 2 of that sometimes entire decks just fold to that card.
Correct.
Like, I think Astema is one of them, and that's like one of the reasons I don't really put Astema as high as the other 3 rulers. And like that deck just does not deal with that card very well at all.
Yeah, you can't really hit it. There's no way to hit it. Yeah. Once Castle of Carlina hits field, the literally only way to kill it is Stan. You cannot get rid of it from any way other than Stan,
and you really don't.
Or untargeted bounce. So like Olivia,
the mermaid.
Olivia.
Olivia. No.
Like Olivia can do it. Like Olivia can get there. The mermaid can get you there if you hard cast it with null, or
Olivia's kind of cute because she can like Goddard the Dolly out to like bounce Virgil and buy herself a turn, but I'm not convinced that Olivia is actually a contender.
Jeremy, Victoria, did the Wanderer deck make you want to play more events with everyone? Yes and no. If anything, it makes me want to like it continue to scratch the itch of like this is what it feels like to play good high quality Force of Will against good high quality players, which is I'm not going to say that my locals are bad, but I'm going to say that my locals are locals. It's a different caliber of player, right? And so I just haven't been able to have that for a very long time by choice.
Give them time. Every single locals that is still alive is becoming a GP powerhouse. All right. First, we had games and ginks. You got Paul Martinson, Thomas Graham, just topping GPs left and right. You got the San Diego guys came out of nowhere. Daniel Negrete and Thiam Galvez have been topping a little bit. Now they bring their friends and they end up winning the event. So Michigan for the online finals winner. We'll see.
Tyler's coming back. Paul Klute's coming back. Watch. Paul, I will say this. Paul Reisman did say at Minnesota, having then commentated it and watching it, he was like, this event was almost enough to make me want to play a competitive Force of Will. And I was like, Paul, I need you on camera. I need you on microphone, please. You're not allowed to go anywhere.
No. Let him play.
I'll let him play. Local... Yeah, but
just like from like being a competitive player for so many years, like I've seen like the same names over and over again, and I really really love how cool it is that the new names that I'm seeing, I'm like, oh, this is a new player. I'm sure I'll never see him again because that's what I've thought for the past 5 years. But now it's like, oh, a new player. He topped the next GP. Wait, who is this guy? Oh, he play tests with Games and Geeks. You know, like he has a locals that he goes to, and he's consistently getting better. And now same thing with the San Diego guys. So like with those locals, like and like you said, this event, like there's that fun of playing and that fun of like building a new tournament, but like the main takeaway I had from this was like I gotta get AJ to play Forcible again. Like this is something, like it's just like when you play like this kind of event, you're just like, how do I get more of my friends to do this?
I think that's the thing about like what we've been building to in Forcible for the past year and a half. Is like we've been slowly building up to this idea of like it's not pay to win. Like, the format is wider than you think it is. The format is a lot more skill intensive than you think it is. The format is a lot more rewarding than you think it is. And like we've seen these like glimpses. Like we could like taste it. It's like almost there, not quite, almost there. This truly felt like the full solidifying, which is like cool that it's coming at the end of this like 2 clusters. Like we have a full 2 clusters worth of stuff. I mean, Alice Origins cluster has kind of fallen off, but there are definitely some cards from Alice Origins that are still finding their way into tech slots, as we've seen. Rhea, Sigurd, Raisin Revive was seeing some play. Like we've seen those tech Athena, we've seen them kind of coming in. It truly is like, this is what good competitive environment can be. And I think one of the things that I want to know, your locals has expanded from Bremont to also Eris. I think one of the things that I want to put out into the world, I've had this conversation with a little bit, is there are certainly complaints that can be had about power creep. There's certainly complaints that can be had about set design. I get it. I understand it wholeheartedly. Having played this game for 6 years, I get it. I think we are officially at a point, though, that the argument you're making, you can't make just about Force of Will anymore. Like, it is...
card games go,
it is now... It's transit... I think it's... What I'm trying to put in people's heads is this argument that you're making is an argument about card games. You're not actually really arguing about specifically Force of Will problems anymore. You can't. Like, sure, it is a problem in Force of Will, but if you really step back... Take a second and step back, you will realize that that same argument literally falls into every other card game. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen in Force of Will communities that are really starting to thrive or pick up or grow or new players, is we're seeing that mentality of like, yeah, this is just a card game thing. Like, I don't really like love it, but it's just like, I accept it as part of my card games. And as we go into this next cluster, I really want to see more of that, like being like championed of like, we're just having card game problems. That's what happens.
And I mean, I've complained a lot about power creep in the past, but I completely subscribe to your ideology here. It was really, so like I said before, I haven't really owned cards in a while, but it was like the Welser Celesta set came out, and it was like, that's cool. That's like really powerful stuff, but isn't just like Resart better? And then the 6 Sages came out, and then I watched the Grand Prix where the online Grand Prix where Derek won with the 4C
loop.
Mooch, yeah. And I was like, Force of Will's really cool right now. And then it was the next set where I bought into it, and it's they printed Wolfgang, Olivia, but like Lycion, Melfi, and I'm like, this game is getting out of control, but it's so fun. It really is, and it's just like. When and then like buying this set, I'm like, of course I'm buying this set, and it's just more powerful stuff. The old powerful stuff is still good. You can still mess with it. You still have to be aware of it. It's just, it really feels good to like want to buy new cards, because one of the problems from before with like Rhea cluster and the what's the name of the last cluster?
New Valhalla. Oh, Alice Origins.
Yeah, Alice Origins versus like DBV is like. I just played Brunhild the entire format. I never touched Regalia Ruler. So it is kind of like annoying when it's like, oh wow, you printed new cards. These are interesting. These are cool.
Now I gotta touch them.
Kaguya, so what? Like, why would I even like invest in this? But then it's like the 6 Sages came out, and I'm like, oh, we're epic story style. Like, we're doing cool shit. And then it's like, all right, next set, I'm in. All right, Melfi's like, yeah, let's give it to me. Fallen Angels, we get to produce a butt ton of mana. Like, honestly, ban stuff. Like, feel free to just ban 6 Sage Stones so that Carlina can't like 5 mana plays on turn 1. Like, actually do that. But like, I will still continue to play the game because like, have that freedom to make broken nonsense, but then pull back. Like even Yu-Gi-Oh's been around for 20 years or whatever. Is at an insanely degenerate point. Magic is constantly like making broken stuff and then pulling back on it. Flesh and Blood came out not even 2 years ago, and they're already making ban lists. Just like make broken stuff, make your game fun, and then pull it back. I'm 100% in favor of power creep. I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to talk about is like, there's this element that we've seen from, and I see it more with old guard players who aren't actively playing anymore, or who are like fringe playing anymore, of this idea of you have this complaint and that's your driving stance about the game as a whole. But I challenge that by saying, yeah, but you're still here. So like, you could acknowledge the complaint and then also have good things too. And I think that's one of the things that I want people to have, is like recognize that there is so much good that like we've hit a point where it's just card game problems. It's not a foul problem anymore. It's just card game problems. So enjoy this card game that you're a part of. Like, just, you're here, so be here and just be a part of it, right? Like, I'm never gonna stop raising up concerns that the community has with the company. I'm never gonna stop trying to say like, hey, here's data, maybe we need to ban this card, or maybe we should look at this, or here's what the community is saying about this. I'm never gonna stop that. I'm also never gonna stop playing this card game, and I'm also never gonna stop being like, yeah, just play. Just like, I hear you. Keep playing. Because it's so much fun. Like the things that I playing Cube, and like seeing, we played the Cube 3 times over the course of the weekend. Everybody that played the Cube, like new people, old people, everybody was like having a blast, and it's like, yeah, because like Force of Will is a good game. Like, yep. It's just a good game. Remember that Force of Will is a card game, and it's just good. Just play it.
It's basically like one of the most well-designed card games that actually uses like mana as a resource. I mean,
yeah,
that's just what it is. Right?
Like, but it's a Japanese game. Like, you have to recognize that it's a Japanese game, but deep down you love it. You love it. Like, you're trying to be like the snob of being like, well, things are broken in power creep. Stop. Just stop. It's a card game. It's from Japan. It's well designed. You love it. Play it, please.
Jeremy, quick reminder to you: if you do bring up anything to the company, if you ever voice your opinion,
sure.
Reminder there was only one card that saw 100% usage rate at
6-stage Stone.
In the top 8. Correct.
Yeah. So currently my 2 trains of thought for 6-stage Stone is like, it's probably worth banning. I'm keeping an eye on it, and I'm like raising that up. It's also probably worth reprinting as a promo.
So the problem, right, is we're about to lose dual stones in this rotation, and that the uncertainty of what they want to do with that is a problem.
Yeah,
like,
which is why I'm advocating more for like a reprint as a promo, so that it has more access. Especially since we're also going away from everything we know so far is that we're going away from tag. We're about to enter a cluster with no more tag. So like.
It's just weird, right? Because for non-dual stone formats, it's really cool because when you have better card pools, having worse stones makes the format more interesting.
Yeah.
Because right now we're in almost an 5-colored format where you have 4 6-stage stones. You have Ataractia's Memoria if you're the Fallen Angels. You've got dual stones. You've got alternate 5-color stones like the base white. If your opponent plays 2 rulers, it produces 5-color. If you have an Astral Ruler, it produces 5-color. Like, you have a bunch of access to every single color in the game. So the decks are really, especially like Thief Mooge, especially Dante Belial, it's boiling down to what are the best 40 cards I can put in a deck, and then I'll figure out the mana base afterwards. But when you have 2 full clusters of like really strong stuff, it gets a lot more interesting deck building wise when your stones actually restrict you to say, oh, here's your best 40 green cards, here's your best 40 black cards, here's your best 40 white cards. Now, pick the best of them, and you only get to put 2 or 3 colors in a deck. And 6-stage Stone, once we lose duels, might kind of allow you to cheat a little bit. I think the last time we had a situation like this was when we had Ruler's Memoria and no dual stones, and it was like Stealth was the thing that emerged because you could just set chance standbys for 2 of anything, and if you didn't hit Rosemore, you could still play the game, and you also wanted Darkness Stones. But you still like built 5-color decks. You were just heavily black, kind of light on the 5-color, and that's probably what's going to happen if we move forward with 6 stage stones. So I don't know if like I really don't like getting rid of it completely because
I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're at the point where again I think there's a little bit of a spoiler in the sense that like we now have 2 sets worth of tag rulers. And so you're like naturally driven to that. But I think you're right. Like with the loss of dual stones and seeing what singleton rulers in next cluster are capable of makes me wonder, like, does it? Or is it going to be something that like, nah, there's enough stuff for singleton rulers to be okay with not having this. And like that can be the upside to playing tag. Like you get to use this stone and get kind of creative in that way. So we'll have to see. But that's why I said, like, my current advocacy is let's make it a friggin' promo because people need it.
Yeah, no. I mean, one of my favorite parts about Force Will when I got into it was that it was such a cheap game, and I'd come from Yu-Gi-Oh into Force Will, and it was like, oh, I can build this Bahamut deck for $100. That's pretty awesome. And now it's $200 just to get 4 stones, and you go from there. It's like, wait a minute, how do I convince people to play this game right now? You know? So,
yeah, it's a little bit of a trick, which is why the starter deck's are a nice thing. You know, there's a lot of cool things that are coming. I just think these arguments that we can make for or against, just like again. Step back. It's a card game problem. It's not a foul problem. It's a card game problem.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, just ask your. I think the biggest thing is ask yourself when you're complaining about something in foul. Ask yourself: is this a foul problem or is it a card game problem? Because if it's a card game problem, then you can say, yeah, okay, and you can like be frustrated by it, accept it, or raise your voice to say like, hey, we could try to work on something. But remember, at the end of the day, like it's every card game deals with this. And because someone asked, the cube. This is the cube's new home. Coming to more cube.
It's a rectangle.
Yeah, it's a rectangle.
Yeah,
cube,
well, it's fair. It's fair. Cube. So with that, we are going to call it here for tonight. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you to everybody so much in the chat for your points and your questions and everything else. It has been a wonderful conversation. Lots to learn as we get ready for lots of practice as we get ready for the GP later this month. Again, 3 invites on the line, a paid and 2 unpaid, plus $1,000 of cash split among the top cut, which will
That's pretty cool.
pretty much be a cash split. We've never not had a whole US group of people split cash outside of AJ wanting to take home $20,000, which is fair because he won Masters. But we're gonna be bringing you guys some cool stuff this week. We have a Blue Violet feature match, Blue Violet versus Carlina Asmodeus. I call it like clown combo because it's just like, or combo fiesta, because there's just like so many weird things that you can do with Asmodeus and Carlina combined together. But that'll be a lot of fun. And then a tournament report later this week. And Paul apparently is finishing one more episode of the yearbook, specifically Guardian of the Light Magic Stones, getting a yearbook feature. So be on the lookout for that sometime this week.
Is that a ruler?
Yeah, from Vingolf 3.
Yeah, it's like the dragon that existed.
Yeah, the white dragon.
People built decks around that ruler. I didn't even know that.
You're about to.
All right.
But yeah, that's it for us. Again, I've been DMO73, and I've been joined by Mike Rance and Ryan Miles. And we'll see you all next time. So until then, class dismissed.